Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of the Crease Analysis Draft Guide. Today, we will be looking at all the long shots of the draft. These are my seventh and sixth round picks that generally have significant upside in some area, but a great level of uncertainty. The NHL is trending towards using more goalies consistently, especially given the NCAA merger and the weaker draft class skater wise. We should be seeing an increased number of goalies drafted up from the average of 22. These next 25 goalies are ones that I truly believe deserve to be picked. There could be even be more than that, and that's why I listed seven more as honorable mentions. Before we begin, please remember to check out the other parts of this series and leave any comments on what you think about my rankings. Anyways, let's dive into our first goalie at number 25. Ryan Cameron is, without a doubt, the most difficult goalie I've had to rank in anything that I've done before. Why do you ask? Well, it's because the only tape I had to go off of was film of his practice sessions with his goalie coach, Halinka Gretzky tape from August, 18U AAA tape from December, and a lone USHL game before the new year where he let in 8 goals in a stunning performance. This is because, well, the North American Hockey League hates all scouts and doesn't really have any accessible tape. The only league worth noting that I can't watch. So, making a full conclusion on Cameron is, as you'd imagine, quite difficult. He's ranked decently high by a few agencies, which makes me rather certain he will get drafted. With what little I've seen, he's got some good raw talent. He lacks height, but he's similar to someone like Augustine or Dustin Wolf. He's a fantastic skater and athlete, and overall, he has good technique. But again, it's kind of hard to tell, as I haven't really seen him in his most recent play or against any good competition. I think he has a weakness in his hands. A lot of goals I've seen him let in were just due to them being inactive, where he can get beat high or above the pad. It could be concerning for the NHL, but it's also improvable. There also haven't really been too many successful goalies drafted out of the Null. Connor Hellebuck and Anthony Stolarz are obviously very good goalies, and they came out of the same year, but they're vastly different from Ryan Cameron. Arseny Sergeyev looks to be the best of recent memory so far, seeing as Adam Gayan has been struggling since his draft year, though. Overall, it's not a great sign for Cameron, but at the very least, he was extremely dominant in the league statistically. I think Cameron is someone who easily could be much higher on this list, but I just can't, in good faith, rank him like that without truly being able to see what he's made of. He's just a complete wild card for me because of that. Arseny Radkov is a very intriguing prospect. Teams will often pick first year draft eligibles out of Russia as long as they are either playing games, are decently sized, and or are athletic. So this makes me think that Radkov will get picked here. He's very mobile, quite flexible, and at 6'4", that's a really good asset to have. He will be able to cover a lot of ground in any situation and generally cover a ton of net. He's also got a solid foundation in his stance. He's got good knee bend, great projected hands positioning, but sometimes can have overly bent hips. When you bend your hips too much, you're putting your weight too far forward in your stance, which causes issues with generating power. Radkov is a good skater, proficient edges, and precise, but he's not very fast because of those flexed hips. He's also shown trouble with awareness and tracking the play. He seems to slowly process certain passes and almost look surprised in certain cases. Yet at the same time, he has such good habits that even though cognitively he will be a bit behind, he makes those most economical and efficient plans and he executes them at a high level. I think these issues of his are of concern if they don't improve, but they could be easily worked on with some minor tweaks given where his other talents lie. The raw potential with his mobility, frame, positioning, and skating are more than good enough to warrant a pick. And with him committed to coming to play for UMass in 2026, I really like his development plan. Matthias Langevin is someone who, up until right before the QMJHL playoffs, likely wasn't on anyone's radar for the draft. Being a D+1 backup who was traded to Rimouski mid-season, it can be difficult to garner that kind of attention, and for good reason. But with an untimely injury to William Lassell, Langevin stepped into the starter's role and began to absolutely run away with it. Even with Rimouski hosting the Memorial Cup, Langevin's playoff run was nothing short of incredible, going 12-3-1 with a 944 save percentage en route to a finals loss to the wagon of a Moncton Wildcats team. This performance is what made me so intrigued with him. It is what actually drove me to watch him. I knew who he was and that he had some decent potential, but like I said, the likelihood of a re entry backup getting picked is extremely slim. So he was placed on the back burner. But now it's evident that the amount of potential he holds. At 6'4", he has the ideal frame for the NHL with a fantastic foundation and stance. He has great knee bend with an appropriate width of legs and holds his hands very well. And for a bit of a more erratic goalie, he holds his stance stable throughout his movement, which creates efficient and effective movement. On top of his frame, he's very athletic. He competes at an intense level, moving with great urgency, and he uses his innate explosiveness, flexibility, and mobility to move in any situation. He's also a great skater and generally has good initial positioning. The problem is following play. He relies too heavily upon his athletic features to travel through the crease in place of consistent anticipation and small adjustments. You'd like to see a re-entry with more poise and refinement given his older age, but he just hasn't quite gotten the opportunity until now, so he will have some catching up to do. He's someone that there's some good raw potential untapped in there. A good goalie coach and proper opportunity should hopefully unlock it where he could become a backup. I just don't think it will happen very soon. If you're looking for an exciting goalie, Cam Hendrickson is your guy. Arguably the greatest competitor in the class, Hendrickson is a hyper athletic, intense goalie whose greatest physical comparison is a high flying luchador wrestler. I thought Hendrickson should have been drafted last year. He was coming out of high school mainly, but had impressed me enough in a stint with Omaha, even compared to his teammate Mikhail Yegorov, that I thought he was someone you had to take a flyer on late. The raw talent is flowing in abundance. He's highly flexible, is incredibly explosive, and has amazing skating. On top of that, his 6'2" frame is quite workable, and his stance is surprisingly good. I also like what I've seen from his positioning and play reading. While he is a very erratic goalie, he still processes play at high speeds and has great initial positioning, tracking play extremely well. It's just a matter of how much bodily control he has in his movement. He can throw his limbs around or take himself out of position by making grandiose movements. In terms of his performance, he's a bit of a wild card. In short, the guy is a born winner. He steals games often and is always playing at a high pace, making huge saves. He seems to light a fire under his team with his play. Omaha of the USHL is a brutal team. Last year, they were horrid, letting Yegorov hang out to dry, but in Hendrickson's short stint, he came in and posted a 4-1 record. This year, Yegorov and Hendrickson split the first half of the season, with Hendrickson arguably getting the better of his counterpart, but struggled to win much because Omaha got even worse. The pair then got split up, with Yegorov going on to dominate with Boston University, and Hendrickson went to Waterloo to become the starter there, where he saw a significant decrease in numbers despite a major jump in team quality. This is a very peculiar situation because it's rather illogical, but I don't think it should be looked at too negatively. Essentially, Waterloo would allow the same highly dangerous chances, stuff where Hendrickson is just going to let that in and have little control over it. But because they are overall so much better, they're limiting the low quality shots that fluff save percentage. Suffering an injury late in the regular season, Hendrickson's year ended where he failed to return for playoff action. Overall, he had a bit of a rough end of the year, but I still love how much raw potential he has. I think he's someone that could be taken, seeing as he has a Yukon commitment for next year, where he should be a tandem. But overall, there's a ton of uncertainty. He's a long shot, but he does have incredible upside, and I really want it to work out for him. Andrei Svechnikov, possibly the most hilarious goalie of the draft. Why do you ask? Well, let's think of playoff Stuart Skinner. He was either lights out or, well, we don't really talk about the other side. Svechnikov has been doing exactly that, but for the entirety of the season. You don't get an average game from him. You either get a 930 save percentage performance or you get a sub 880. He's just very inconsistent and can be highly erratic, which is why he's down my list. but he is a very athletic goalie, and at his best, has looked like a great one. Poland is a gung ho offensive team. Even though they score a lot and win a lot of games, they've also allowed a lot of goals. In fact, the highest mark since 2009 in the WHL. Now, I think the team itself is partly responsible for that, but so is Stevatok. He's shown some decent technical skill, having solid skating and positioning, and a pretty good frame. The biggest interest in him is how he can field so many shots and still have a good game. When he's locked in, the guy is just having crazy games, which he did throughout the playoffs, where Portland would get shelled and he would stand tall and pull through. It could say a lot about his mental makeup, but simultaneously, he just isn't always on his game and can easily get blown up, seemingly losing confidence. Sibatok will very likely be picked. He seems to be highly liked by many agencies, and usually athletic goalies who persevere on poor defensive teams, even if their stats suck, get a huge boost in draft stock. I don't really care too much about that though. It's almost easier to look good on bad defensive teams because people are much more forgiving of poor performances. The idea is that, well, it's expected. But it's not like Sevatok isn't winning. He even went pretty deep in the playoffs. I just don't know if there's much here beyond a backup for Sevatok, but I like his skill set and his best self enough where hopefully he can rid himself of the inconsistency and horrible performances to grow more confident and not get rattled. Roberto Leonardo Henriquez is quite the mouthful to say, so I will be sticking to RLH. The Slovakian Dominican goalie, yes, you heard that right, there might be a Dominican national drafted in the big 2025, transitioned to North American hockey pretty early on. He played quite well there and became the backup for Green Bay of the USHL mid-season, where things were a lot rockier. RLH is very similar to Cam Hendrickson, but he gets the edge here due to it being his draft year. He's one of the most athletic goalies in the class, has great skating, and has shown good flashes of anticipatory ability, all of which are difficult skills to improve. But his technique as it stands is severely flawed. He's inconsistent, evidently shown from his poor numbers in the USHL, and probably has the worst combination of positioning and stance out of everyone that I've ranked. He can just be off angle frequently, and a lot like fellow Slovak Adam Gajan, he plays wide and low to the ground. He's susceptible to high shots, and given his lack of size, he's going to be taking up much less net. Something that I think will get seriously taken advantage of in higher leagues. So the development of this is of the utmost importance. I like his potential a lot, but there's just a lot of uncertainty here. And having poor positioning with his erratic athletic nature doesn't really bode well for his projectability. I think if he transitioned to USHL play better, there would be a better shot of him getting drafted. But with his technical concerns, I could easily see him just completely falling out of the draft. So teams can wait to see where he's at next year. It's not to say I don't think he should get drafted. The physical talent is very impressive, and it's much easier to work with smarter goalies. I just think he has a good chance to not work out, but he does have the potential to be a very effective NHL goalie nonetheless. As one of the many overagers I have ranked this year, Philbergs is actually on the unique side. Here's a goalie that showed out at the biggest junior stage at the World Juniors, having one of the most impressive goalie runs of recent memory, and who is genuinely much farther ahead of his peers in refinement and control. Felbergs is solid and well rounded, but that's kind of it. He lacks any standout qualities outside of mental aspects such as competitiveness and mental fortitude. He's reliable and consistent, which is good for the NHL, obviously. There are qualities that many in this class and many in the NHL lack. But most goalies who make the show generally have at least one or two really good qualities that make them stand out. I just think Philbergs lacks that kind of dynamic talent that severely limits his upside. I don't know how much more he can improve, but he seems highly likely to end up as a high level AHL guy who floats around different organizations as a reliable third string. There's value in a late pick in taking a guy who seems really likely to reach the NHL in some capacity, but everyone above him has some serious talent where they could reach a much higher ceiling, which is why Feldberg falls here. Ever hear of Dustin Wolf? I mean, I sure have. May I present to you the Dustin Wolf clone in Raiden Lal? Without the NCAA merger, there was a guaranteed 100% chance that Lal was not going to be drafted because he was playing in Manitoba Junior A, waiting to go to the NCAA next year. But when he stepped into the WHL for Everett, he owned the place. In his short tenure in both the regular season and playoffs, he was looking like another certain 6 foot dominant WHL goalie who went under the radar. He's one of the best skaters, athletes, and competitors in the class. Legal, also like Wolf, is very consistent in his play. He plays with great confidence, doesn't get rattled easily, and is always moving with urgency and purpose. He's also generally got very good positioning, effective depth, and good angling. And while he may not be the calmest goalie ever, I still think he's a lot more composed than most hyper athletic goalies. And given his confident demeanor, I am fully confident his poise will continue to improve. The concerns are the obvious ones, his height, but I wonder more about his hands and intelligence. At his height, he takes up less space naturally. So, to counteract that, active hands are key. He hasn't always been up to par with that, so he might be more susceptible to medium to high shots. He's also shown to have some issues in anticipating play or selecting the correct movements, which is a much larger concern. But on the other hand, I've seen Wolf have those same issues when he was a bit younger, so I don't know if Legal will be too hindered by them. So, does he get drafted? Honestly, can't tell. From what I see, he's a better version of Cameron with similar levels of junior experience and dominance, except Legal was playing in the WHL. I think Cameron gets picked, so logically, Legal should be too. But there's a bit of a concern with his immediate development. He's going to Bemidji State alongside Max Hillebrand, the current reigning WHL goalie of the year. So playing time doesn't really look to be in Legal's favor. I want him to continue down the NCAA route, but he will need games or he just won't develop properly. I'd like to see him decommit for next year, as Everett actually lost their other goalie to Pentacon, and pursue a D1 commitment the following year. All in all, I think you have to bet on goals who displayed this level of dominance with an elite combination of speed and skating. They often tend to work out, and it gives him a very strong foundation where he can focus on improving his issues a lot easier. I see a possible tandem in Legal, but since his development very easily could get stunted, I have my reservations.